Welcome. It's great to be here with you today. I'm happy to welcome all participants on Zoom and all of our viewers on LinkedIn. Just a few basics beforehand. On Zoom, please mute your mics. We all know this. Turn on your cameras. It's great to see each other in the face. Please post questions in the chat or in the LinkedIn event chat. We'll bring them in to the Q&A session. And of course, feel free to participate actively in the Q&A after the presentation or even in between. We'll prompt you to do so. Use the raise hand function on Zoom or just wave to us. My name is Aker Rudolf. I'm the director of the UX Design Awards and head of strategy at the International Design Center Berlin, the organization behind the awards. The IDZ is a leading German nonprofit design institution. We are a key design association for designers, consultancies, and companies active for more than 50 years. Our mission is to promote design as a driver of innovation in business and society. And the UX Design Awards are our flagship event that promotes the power of good design worldwide. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this deep dive session. These sessions, we present them twice a month with different award-winning teams, both professionals and new talents, their projects, their stories. And for other upcoming events, please check out our newsletter on our website, follow us on LinkedIn and on social media. So why are we here? Of course, today's deep dive project has been handed the Gold Award by the jury in 2020. The jury of the awards. The awards are a global competition for excellent experiences. We founded the awards in 2015 with the aim to raise the recognition of the value of positive experiences and of experience design, of course, in product services, prototypes, but also in visionary concepts, which is one that we'll be talking about today. And of course, in the work by young designers. So if you're working on some great experience projects, then make it count and check out the call for entries for the UX Design Awards 2022 and enter your work by the end of November. Have a look at our website. We'll be happy to see your work in the awards as well. But this competition is not only about promotion. We created the awards because we believe that good UX has a huge and ever-growing impact on shaping a positive living environment for us all. And good experience design helps to create solutions that are relevant, products that improve our lives, services that help us to achieve our goals in a better way, that are easy, understandable, and even fun to use. But good experience design can also empower. It can improve our abilities, open access to knowledge or health, and by doing so, strengthen inclusion and participation. That's why we created the awards as a platform to promote great experiences across all industries and to create a community of professionals. And this is why we're here today, a platform for knowledge sharing and networking in UX. And good design, of course, is especially important in the healthcare field where every life counts. So, of course, the past 2 years have shown us very directly and clearly how important healthcare and a well-equipped health system are. So we're glad to welcome two design leaders whose work at Philips Design continues to improve patient and staff experience in the healthcare field, but also of caregivers and families. And our project Lotus that they'll be presenting to us today has been described by the jury as, and I quote, a significant advancement to protecting infant and families' physical, psychological, and emotional state that improves outcomes and mitigates health problems. And when we see at the fact that about 12% of births worldwide are premature, and these children and adults later on bear long-term effects through poor neonatal care, then we can understand that this is a very relevant and complex project. So with this, I would like to introduce our speakers. Alex Tan is Design Innovation Director at Philips Design. He's a visionary thinker and leader with a diverse background that spans across many industries and design disciplines. He's a very hands-on design leader. He enjoys rolling up his sleeves, works together with a team, whether it's setting a vision, sketching ideas, conducting field research, or even 3D modeling or coding. And Alex believes that a good design leader should also be well-versed in the craft of design. With him is David Ruthven. He's a senior experience lead at Philips Design. Dave is a multifaceted designer and architect by trade. He explores the intersection of people, technology, and the built environment to create better healthcare experiences. He has worked on a wide variety of projects that seek to improve care touchpoints through a blend of service, space, product, and digital elements. And his work has been featured in diverse publications, from the Time magazine to Fortune, Wired, Metropolis, or even the Wall Street Journal. And at Philips Design, Dave leads teams from contextual research through the entire development of advanced design solutions. So with this, I would like to welcome Dave and Alex and hand over the screen to Alex Tan. The screen is yours, Alex. Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Alex.
Yeah, you're still mute.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Rookie mistake. Hey, thank you, Aka and the UX Design Awards team for giving us this opportunity to speak to you. So today, I'm going to start off with giving an overview of the the context of the problem, but I also want to highlight that I'm actually in our living lab, so the project that has resulted this, and we can explore this and make it very interactive. Together with Dave, and a bigger team with basically, it's a big team that has brought this concept to life, and we'd like to basically deep dive with you more into it. So let me just run through a few slides, of our presentation to just set the context of the problem and why we think, at Philips here, it's actually a good thing to kind of look at. So I think you can see my screen, hopefully. Yep. All right. So yeah, the project, of course, is Lotus, NICU of the Future. And as Aka already mentioned, right, about 1 in 10 babies are born prematurely. This is kind of worldwide statistics. And a lot of parents, when they think about having a baby, this is kind of a vision that they say, right, hey, a nice crib in a room and baby coming home. But the reality of it is that some babies, they are so sick, they're born prematurely, they cannot breathe by themselves, they're very sensitive to noise and lights, and they need to be hooked up to life support systems. And this is an extreme view of a baby that's in the neonatal ICU. Of course, this baby here has also other conditions that require them to be hooked up to a lot of machines. So these are some of the things that we want to explore and say, hey, look, how can we tackle this issue, right? And of course, the babies are prodded with different kind of probes and needles and kind of a lot of kind of patches that are also damaging their fragile skin, actually, and the senses. So imagine someone that's just been born very comfortable in the womb, and then they come up and they're being manhandled by nurses and things like this. So why is this an issue? This is basically a kind of graphic of where the brain development is actually. So on the right side, term gestation. So when the baby, if it's full term, the brain is actually fully developed. At 23, 24 weeks, the brain is actually not very developed yet. And these are a lot of the stimulus that you give early on actually can really change the course of that development actually. And these things actually causes long-term impact quality to life actually. So things like hearing impairments actually, or different disabilities in terms of depending on how they kind of lay down, structural, skeletal kind of disabilities as well, hearing, sight loss, these kinds of things. So this is actually a problem that can lead to long-term issues with babies that are born prematurely and don't receive the proper kind of care actually. So basically at Philips, what we've done is that we worked with different neonatal nurses and organizations, and this is one of the kind of let's say programs that have been developed to help babies in this situation. So it's quite a mouthful. It's called Neuroprotective Family-Centered Developmental Care. And what it means is to, rather than just look at the key issues like what's wrong with your heart, the organs, the physical aspects, you're looking at really a holistic view of the development of a baby, right? So you're looking at partnering with families, having a healing environment. What does that mean? That means the touch, the light, the sounds, the taste, the smell, those have to be controlled so they don't get overstimulated, right? Nutrition is important. Positioning and handling, how you position the baby, not lying, on its sides, those are very important. And safeguarding sleep, things like, so getting them to rest and sleep is also very important. So, this kind of model basically forms the foundation of what we've worked here today, in this lab that you're about to see. And before we go into that, the other thing is that also a lot of these kind of holistic information and today's, let's say, medical technology and how we deal with it is very fragmented, right? So with all these different equipments, bringing in different information, that's very fragmented. It's hard for the clinicians looking after these babies to form a holistic view, right? Through all these, and many places are still, using paper, so that's very hard to bring things together. How do you, get this information in one location that's easily accessible? So, physicians, clinicians also get a lot of high rates of burnout because there's just so much information that they're overwhelmed with, across healthcare. So basically with this, we brought in together a multidisciplinary team, and you can see these are by all means not all the team members, but we look at clinicians, pediatricians, NICU nurses, software scientists, architects, both UI, UX designers, service designers. So a whole bunch of people to really work holistically to tackle this problem, because it is more than just a single point solution that we have to deliver, because it is part of that system, the service that we can deliver. Okay, with that said, I'm going to play just a quick 2.5 minutes movies just to introduce the lab, and then we can go from there.
Babies born prematurely or with complications are admitted to a neonatal intensive care unit. The NICU can be a stressful environment for parents and newborns, with excessive noise and light impacting physical and neurological development. Philips is working on next-generation concepts to humanize the NICU experience through a neuroprotective, family-centered developmental care model in line with the quadruple aim. Our team collaborated with clinicians to construct an experience lab that features key technology touchpoints integrated throughout the environment. The experience begins at the entry threshold, where caregivers can access essential data without having to disrupt the babies and families within. Upon entering, caregivers and family ensure hand hygiene via a smart sync system. Relevant patient and clinical information appears on the screen. After checking in with the baby, caregivers can access important clinical information on a context-aware, user-friendly dashboard that automates NICU workflow and supports informed decision-making. Analytics consolidate relevant clinical data from multiple devices into a meaningful format, customized for each user. Caregivers do not waste time searching for data and can make faster, better-informed decisions. Using a camera and other sensors, the dashboard holistically tracks the baby's development and progress and monitors environmental factors including temperature, noise, and light levels. Events that need to be addressed first are highlighted. Caregivers use the platform for connecting with each other to discuss, plan, and agree on the best actions, and then use the scheduler tool to jointly plan daily activities. A simplified care schedule is shared via the Family Hub, a user-friendly interface that supports family engagement. Parents can peek in at their baby, view a progress tracker, watch educational videos, and communicate with caregivers. The adaptive environment changes according to the situation, supporting families as they provide care for their baby. From the first moments until it's time to go home together, making life better for all parties through meaningful, human-centered innovation.
Right. So just to kind of summarize, and after this I'm going to stop here and maybe make it a bit more interactive. So some of the things that you've seen here is really looking at this room, right? There are definitely different aspects to it. From the thing about the entry display, one of the, let's say, trends at least here in the US is to move patients more from a bay kind of setup where you have many into single family rooms actually. This gives the parents and the baby privacy, it reduces the kind of the noise and things like this. However, that also makes the clinicians actually hard to kind of have an overview of what is in the room without going in there. So the idea of this, how can we use this technology to be able to check in on the babies, even remotely or outside the room, right? To look at tracking the information of the baby. Are they doing well? And it's, in the sense the alerts. Other things that you see in here, hand washing station, a lot of things is, again, encouraging this hygiene so that, the kind of infection is not kind of happening. And this is the ideal station that we have that also helps, people that come into the room to just kind of maintain this kind of awareness that keeping proper hand hygiene is actually very good for the development of baby as well. Other things that we have, you just saw in the video, is like RFID single sign-on, so that each clinicians or person coming in has their own screen, so we tailor the UI to their needs. So whether it's a physician, a neonatologist, or a nurse coming in, they have the information that they want. And one of actually the big innovation here is the patient 360. So this is the idea of taking that developmental care and bringing it together into this holistic overview. In the center of the image, you actually see a live camera view of that baby. And this is working on some of our advanced development technology, which uses cameras to really detect the vitals of the baby. So that's one thing that we're kind of interested to look at. And this kind of a smart system actually alerts, basically in advance if things are going wrong or things that you need to look at in terms of what are the body systems. Other parts of it is the collaborative dashboard. So this huge dashboard that brings in the clinicians and allows them to have one single view of multiple sources. So remember how I said there are many different, let's say, systems that are in the hospital. We're basically using this kind of dashboard that allows you to bring up multiple applications, have that overview, and bring that information together. Another important part is, of course, the parental dashboards. And one of the key issues really with parents coming to this situation is that they're just so much information that you're overwhelmed, right? You're imagining, hey, I'm going to have a this kind of normal baby going at home, a nice nursery, and suddenly you're thrust into this situation. It's a big shock. So this dashboard is really bringing that same patient information, but in a different way for the parents, actually, in a more, let's say, understandable way. It's also a portal whereby they can, look into this room if they cannot come and visit. So, the babies basically spend, months in this room, right? So how can you enable them to also be able to live their life, the work life, and be able to still connect and engage in the care of the baby, because that's one of the important pillars. Another part here is really the adaptive environment. So how the environment can adapt to the different needs of the clinicians, because sometimes you need to be very soft and calm when the baby is sleeping. But if there's an emergency, then you need the lights to come on very quickly. And how can this room adapt and transform? And then finally, protect is one of the elements that I've mentioned already. The idea of this camera that protects this, monitors the baby and looks at the sleep of it. So with that, I'm just going to pause there and maybe, look at the crowd and see, if you want to dive now more into, let's say, some questions and,
Well, thanks so much. Maybe David, as you are a key part of the team there, and you also said beforehand that you're also an architect, and this is very much also about the space and not just about an interface or an IT system. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the functions of the space. And sure. Alex, maybe you can show us around a little bit, because this is really a unique chance to walk into a working advanced design prototype, right?
Yeah, really for me, this was project that is one of those in your career doesn't come along very often, right? Is where you can really rethink from the ground up everything in a care space. So typically in, hospital design, you're thinking about the planning and the layout of, large groups of rooms and units, but you never really get down to the level of the actual products in the space. It usually is just you create the box and then you fill it with the stuff. And I think here what was really exciting about this project is that we had the leeway to reconceptualize pretty much every aspect of the care process. And we had experts within Philips and external groups come in and basically work directly with us to understand kind of what was working in their current workflow and what wasn't working, and be able to start to pull those insights together and try and test and iterate different concepts around care. So for me as an architect, I think the ability to actually have some say and insight into a piece of technology like the dashboard on the footwall, which is really providing all the clinical information in one aggregated location, that completely transformed the way work would be done in the room and how information would be presented, and how people could collaborate. So we tried lots of different locations for that. We did a lot of kind of process mock-ups of where different key components and elements could go. And, it's like, well, it's just a TV on a wall, right? And I think the reality of it is very different, is that this space, depending on who you talk to, if it's the family, it's where they're trying to care for their infant. They're almost in some cases living there. So they want access to conveniences and they want the space to respond to their needs so that they can be comfortable. But for clinicians, this is a very sick child that requires really advanced care. So they really take this very seriously. Everything has to be in its place, and the space on a whim has to transform from maybe this more kind of comfortable environment with like lower light levels and amenities for the family into almost all hands on deck. There's a code. We need everyone in the room to come help, resuscitate the child or take care of an emergency situation. So we took a lot of great care and paid a lot of attention to detail around how the space could adapt and transform and support all these different key activities that would need to occur. And I think balance those, right? Balance the needs across all these groups so that, no one group felt like they weren't represented, from the doctors and physicians all the way down to the people cleaning the space. So I think that we, through the use of integrated technology and kind of thinking about it as more than just a screen, the whole experience, from the corridor all the way through and into the room, even to discharge planning when people leave the hospital, we tried to really represent through using this kind of room as a vehicle, much more than just the physical environment. It's really just the experience of going through this, really what can be a very traumatic event. Many cases nowadays, everything ends up fine and kids grow up and go on and are successful. But this sobering reality is in many of these environments, there's very challenging social situations. And, in some cases, the baby's going through withdrawal from drug dependency. There's some really challenging things that happen in this space. So, I think as Alex walks you through the design and we look at some of the key details, that was really, it's beautiful. I love the visuals. I love the ideas, but embedded in all of that is a lot of care and thought around how people are really can experience kind of going through this process and how we could help make that smoother for them.
There was actually some questions on this because it sounds like an extremely complex process with very different stakeholders. So how were you able to combine all these different views? And somebody else asked that some slides date back to 2014. So this looks like a very long development process. So what kind of time frame are you looking into this? That's two questions in one.
Okay, so let's maybe start with the trajectory of this project actually. So actually this project actually was even before that, right? So we started, it was probably in 2011, 2012, where there was a concept car of this NICU that was created. So that was really truly a conceptual design. So we really looked at, inventing new technologies that never existed yet, right? So looking at, hey, the ventilator incubators just completely changed, and really looking at new things that the technology was maybe 10, 20 years out. But that gave a kind of a concept of what the future could be, right? And that was something that I think Philips, we kind of tend to really explore that kind of future scenario, just to kind of let's say challenge people, right, in the healthcare industry. Hey, what could be this better future? I think one of the results was that as we've shown it to a lot of our partners, customers, everyone wanted it, right? So I was, hey, look, when can I get it? When is this going to be available? So there was actually a demand for it. And we did not actually have a real plan to, kind of deliver something like this. And I think this is something that was, subsequently, we reviewed the kind of, let's say, the value and the business case and things. And as Philips that felt that, hey, this is something that we could actually look at, to look at more in the closer horizon to develop it. And I think this is one of the things as a result, look at a room where this kind of technology actually is more within reach and in today. So it's something that we can implement. So, and I think the other thing that we looked at is really bringing in third party, right? So Philips do not do all the equipment. Like, we have parts of the portfolio, but there are different things that we want to bring in without inventing everything from new, right? So how do you integrate this? So a lot of these, so it has a long trajectory. And at this stage, right, this is what I think we call Horizon 2, where it's within closer reaches, and it's not immediately tomorrow, but I think, there are definitely, the plans right now is that we are in partnerships to develop this and commercialize it with certain hospitals here in the US. So that's one of the things that we're working towards right now. But yeah, I think that's a really, something like this takes a long time to really mature in a company, gets the kind of, let's say, buy-in, by showing people, really new things. Sometimes is, business find it difficult to absorb because it's so different from what they're doing currently. The roadmap, we're starting bringing a lot of different things, whereas as a company, you're just saying, hey, we'll just do patient monitors and that's it, right? So that's the kind of something like this right here that you can see. How do you then expand to look at, hey, we want to own the space, we want to own the experience, right? So that is definitely one of the big steps that we're thinking now, more of a holistic solution, thinking more, not just about products and soft products, but looking at software services, the architecture of the space. So how do you claim this space, actually? So I think
there was a question too around maybe jumping more into the UI for the dashboard and kind of the challenges we face there. Because I think, that was almost like the centerpiece of the space, right, for us. And it's a completely new use case in terms of aggregating information and providing access. So we had lots and lots of cycles of development around this, and lots of, I'd say, key lessons learned and along the way. I'll just say quickly from a spatial standpoint, where we actually started with this, and in the concept car that Alex worked to develop originally for this screen was actually located on the head wall right next to the incubator. And the thinking was that, okay, clinicians want to be all grouped around the baby, they want to see the baby and they want to work. But really the reality is that, if you think back to those earlier images in the presentation Alex gave, there's so many machines and there's so much equipment around the baby, is that we quickly figured out that this screen just really wouldn't fit and really wouldn't work appropriately kind of in that location. So ultimately putting it on the footwall enabled us to provide something that was much more suitable for collaboration and for teaming, not only between clinicians, but also with the family. So Alex can jump more into the detail around the design of the interface, because it's pretty fantastic when you see kind of how it functions across all these different stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think this is just before I dive in, right? So one of the things that we're working towards this is really trying to prototype a lot of these experiences, right? Because when you have it on paper, when you just talk about it without experiencing it, it's very different from experiencing it. And I think that's why also with this, we created this room in Philips. This is our experience lab, is really to bring this experience to life and to be able to evaluate it. And I think there was a question about how do you collaborate with so many people, right? Each of these team members bringing their perspective, right? We have to come in together, and we have arguments, we have disagreements, but ultimately, you try to slowly build that vision by doing iterations, right? So by doing that, it's like you basically showed, the stakeholders, all right, you said this XYZ, you said this, let's try and build something together. Does this work? No. All right. Again, so that's the process that I think Dave was talking about, right, as well. There's some slides there were saying, hey, look, we're going to put this big dashboard on the head wall there. This is where everyone is. And then we had these discussions, we brought people in and we kept changing it around, right? So the iteration really helps us develop and grow that idea. And once people see it, then they can react to it and say, no, this is not what I want. Oh, hey, actually, I didn't think that it was, going to be as good, or no. So there is that reaction. So this is a prototype that I can kind of jump into. Of course, as I say, we're in the process of looking at the commercializing this, but right now, this is something that is been looked at as a,
Excuse me, Alex, can you maybe move the screen a little bit closer to it?
Let me see.
Oh, thanks so much.
All right. Hopefully you can see, this. I could actually also bring up, no, let's not do that because I've got a prototype on this. I'll just do it on the screen and just stop me if it gets, you guys get lost about it. So actually I've got a RFID tag. One of the things you saw in the video. So I'm going to badge in, maybe you can see, I'm just going to see whether you can see. I'm going to badge in here. You get a login screen. I'm just going to log in here. It's a shortcut. So here I'm logging in as a profile of a nurse actually. And I can basically set up my profile. And the main thing that you can see here is this 360, right? And the image of a live camera into the incubator right now. So, it's basically a live image. With this kind of dashboard alerts me to different body systems and what may be wrong with it, right? So if you see red, like a traffic sign, hey, there's something wrong with it, you need to look into it. Or if it's yellow, keep an eye on it. So I can go in and say, hey, look, I want to bring this up. And I can tap into this for folks, for clinicians, they want more information. So you can maybe see, it's a very dense information. And that's something we learn to work with as well, right? Some of these things are very important. They can click into each line of these as an information point that we draw from different sources and consolidate it. So here you can see now a trend line. I'm not sure it's easy to view that. Or you can say, hey, look, I want to look at what is the kind of X-ray source again, so this dashboard is starting to mix up a lot of these things that you think, hey, this is normal, right? But in the clinical world, being able to pull these together from one place is, pretty much, non-existent. You can look at, hey, what are the different aspects of the baby? And you can basically click through the different parts of it and explore. So, for instance, I can see, hey, how's the family, right? So this is really tracking then the parental participation, because that's also important value of how the baby works. So with this, or the positioning of the baby and the sound. So this is really looking at the environment, things like this. And a lot of these things are, basically giving them this kind of ability to get situation awareness and then be able to bring this and take action and or decide as a team what kind of actions, because all the information is at your fingertips. The other part of this dashboard that we've developed is really the scheduler, actually. So this is a schedule, we in our kind of, let's say, field research and observations, we notice that a lot of nurses basically write their schedule of the day on a piece of paper because it's easy to do. The current system of record is not very easy to input all these things, right? So it's a keyboard, they just want to say, hey, very quickly put this. But, even though that's fast, the result is that the nurses carry these pieces of paper. There's no overview of the care of the baby. So sometimes things might get missed if the nurse says, hey, can you cover for my shift? Or things get duplicated, right? Because no one knows what's done. So in this kind of dashboard, I can maybe see is that we try to create a system whereby, you already pull in certain things that already exist in terms of the care status of the baby. And you can really easily add things through just drag and drop, right? So again, we prototype these kind of interaction to say, hey, look, it's as easy, you got these categories. You can say, all right, I've got to give my baby's meds at this time of the hour. If it changes, I can say, all right, I can easily move this to the next hour. And if it's done, I can check them off. So I don't know whether you can see this, very clearly, but that's,
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
No, it gives the idea, absolutely.
Yeah. These are the things that looked at.
One key detail there too, kind of a story behind that, is on the project team, we actually had several people that had gone through a NICU experience themselves as parents. And actually one of our design colleagues was going through one at one point in time during this project. So there was a lot of actually firsthand kind of end user feedback that was built into this just from that parent perspective. And one of the biggest areas of frustration that we heard across the board was that the family, and they would want to come in and help, but they didn't know how, and they didn't know what had already occurred. So has the baby been bathed? When was it fed? You know, when was the last time people checked in? So this scheduler tool actually is one of the elements that translates across different user interfaces. So in the family portal, it's a much more simplified kind of consumer facing friendly interface, but that scheduler, the artifacts created in that much more complex tool are actually represented in a simple way in this interface as well. So that when the family comes, you know, in for the day, or you know, wants to know how they can help, that information is kind of extracted and shown to them in this sort of much less clinical, kind of much more approachable format.
Yeah.
So it creates a sense of safety of information, but also gets rid of a lot of unnecessary questions towards the staff, right?
Right.
Exactly.
It also gets rid of a lot of, you'll see in hospitals, most of the time they have papers taped to the wall. So it's like, okay, here's a note here, here's a note here. You get like all these different notifications on the wall. So this is an attempt to start to get rid of some of that clutter and kind of to simplify it, and also to provide a means for people that might not be at the hospital to actually interact and engage. You know, grandparents want to check in and see the baby, or they want to understand what's going on. They would have the ability to do that. You know, especially nowadays with COVID, there's a lot more restrictions around people, how, you know, who can come and go in the hospital. So I think this remote connectivity is even more critical now that we're kind of going through the pandemic.
And you also mentioned that there was a mobile element that actually parents can, and you just mentioned also grandparents can monitor from their home. So there is also connectiveness in terms of information flow. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the idea is that this dashboard that you're seeing right now, so this is the parental screen, will be available on your mobile device as well. So you can access the same kind of resources, right? So, you know, right now, you know, so for instance, Dave talked about the calendar part, but then that's a big part of education, right? So if they click into these body systems, that the parents, they can slowly learn about, hey, why is this part very important for the baby? So it's, again, trying to break down that information into more digestible parts. You know, you can basically see who your care team is, you know, really here on the left side, you know, who are the nurses and things like this, and even reach out to them, right? So with messaging and things like this. So how do you, you know, look at that? So these are some of the concepts that we're really exploring. Other things like just even learning about NICU, right? So bringing the resource as they first come in, how do you onboard them and say, hey, this is the kind of equipment that you're looking at, you know, this does what, you know, so already, because everything is so alien to them. And a lot of parents are also expected when they, you know, leave the NICU, when the baby is ready to leave the NICU, can basically take over a lot of the care responsibilities, because it doesn't end there, right? So there's still things that they need to do. If the baby is really sick, then maybe they might go home with a kind of ventilator or something like this still, right? So a portable ventilator. So these kinds of things that they might need to do things like this, right? So how do you educate and teach them then? So this is kind of a process, you know, in terms of different resources to bring education training. This part is maybe good, you know, in terms of, hey, what are the kind of, let's say, you know, educational elements? They can say, you know, diapering, caring. So, and these are things that, you know, basically the parents have to kind of almost graduate, right? So you can prove that, hey, you can basically, you know, bathe the baby, feed the baby, these kinds of things, you know, when they're very young and fragile.
Hey, there were two questions related to the UI, so we can just maybe wrap this up, this element. How many iterations did you go through? Because it's really a complex system, if that's possible to say, and how finalized is the UI at the moment? So is this like, what stage are you in?
Yeah. So yeah, I think I lost count of the iterations. We went through many iterations, right? And because it's such a big beast as well, there's also many elements that we grow and change. So you know, I think this right now, of course, this room is, we build this prototype, is conceptual, and of course there's process now to commercialize it. But then again, that's a different step, right? How do you then bring it to that next level of productization with the kind of platform. So it will definitely, change and morph as we go into it. But I think what we kind of pull together is really that conceptual framework, right? So the graphics might change, icons and colors might change, but I think the framework really remains. And I think that's basically the solidness of that foundation I think we've built, which is good.
Yeah.
I also want to mention that with this framework, right, what we've done here is, of course, for the neonatal care space, this is actually interface is also very directly applicable to the adult, critical care space as well, because a lot of these kind of, let's say, themes are also being adopted, right? This holistic care in the adult world. So, you find a lot of things that start out in the pediatric and neonatal world eventually graduates to that. So again, the framework of this room, the idea, I think, will definitely, carry on, but how it's eventually, the eventual form of it will probably change, and as we all know, in development cycles.
Yeah, and as a designer, I think we've all been there where on a project, you feel like you're like, we did it, we got it, we finished it. And then you meet with people and you're like, okay, we got to go through another cycle, So I think with this, there was a very long tail and there's a lot of changes. But in the end, when we bring in clinicians to look at this thing, they really do try and poke holes in it and find things with it. And I think in general, what we've seen is that we've done the due diligence, and this thing is realistic enough in our lab and has the thought behind it to kind of stand up against scrutiny. But that's not to say that every hospital is its own unique animal. So it's basically built into this that it be flexible, just because in order to get it adopted, it has to be able to integrate across all these different healthcare systems. And that's going to change even within the same IDN site to site. Sometimes they have different software systems or IT infrastructure that has to come into play. So it's definitely a Swiss Army knife in that regard. It can kind of morph into a lot of different shapes and forms.
Well, of course, with a digital system, it's flexible, so it's an ongoing process. It's adaptable. But there was actually you started to talk towards the direction of how to get this thing to life. And I think that's a very crucial question now from a working prototype, from loads of years of research. And there was this question, which I think really nails it. How do you address the implementation now? How do you address the costs of implementing such a holistic space into real life, and maybe iterate this concept to a version that can be implemented? Do you see like a roadmap there? Did you already stake it out?
Yeah, I cannot dive in too much into our roadmap, but I think that definitely there is discussion in terms of, hey, how do we bring this to life? And that is definitely one element, and it is definitely a long process, right? And as we know, what we propose here is touching upon so many different aspects, right, of a solution that not one company can deliver at all, right? So that's going to be a lot of partnerships. How do you integrate these different things, right? From the architecture, lighting, all these different things, to the software, even just information architecture itself, how you bring all the information together. That's something that, of course, we have definitely a roadmap to do that in many companies, in terms of, the whole AI and bringing this together. But I think there's a lot more than that, right? So it is definitely a long process, but one of the things we're doing is really trying to engage with customers, right? Because as we bring it to the reality as on implementation as well, there are things that we don't know, and that's some of the steps that we're taking, right? Partnering and also co-developing, and just bring this to a level of maturity that is then implementable. But as much as we try, I think we say in this lab that we try to use a lot of off-the-shelf, or readily available components, and basically, integrate it and bring it together in a different way. I think that's one thing. So, in that sense, it's a lot more closer than the future concept car that we've kind of created. It's definitely,
yeah. Typically, with hospitals that come in and that are interested, we've gotten a lot of interest, from customers coming to visit the space. We usually will then augment ourselves with their architecture and design team to basically work with the planning group and understand with their clinical team how elements from this design could be integrated into their existing kind of footprint. So this isn't a one size fits all, like you have to build this room exactly like this for it to work type of system. This was really just a kind of conceptualized version of what the space could be. And to Alex's point, a lot of the environmental systems can be extracted and repurposed and adapted to different types and sizes of space. We did look at different use cases too. Not every hospital system is going to completely private rooms. That is a trend in the US. We've seen just because there's a lot of research that supports outcomes being better and more families being engaged in care. And but there are some hospital systems that still have open bay configurations, or they have situations where they have twin rooms, or different departments for different type of neonates. So I guess for us, this was more about getting people excited and seeing the potential of what could be. But in the background, we also definitely are cognizant of the fact that like we have to have this be a piece of a larger system. So everything was designed to be as flexible as possible to enable it to kind of get over the hump from being this really cool, exciting concept into actually being in hospitals and helping people and improving outcomes.
And this is actually the question. I mean, this shows really the power of what design can do. It's like show, not tell, and convince people when they are able to touch, see, feel, and be convinced. But still, at the bottom line, there is the Excel sheet. So yeah, there was also one question that was directed at, was this like an advanced design project that then got into somehow a stage of realization, more management approach, or were people from management involved from the beginning and pushing this project? What was the story?
Yeah, I think that's definitely actually people from management that was actually pushing this project. So that we had really high-level executive buy-in to really bring this alive to this stage. Because we're really working with real technology, and this things basically at certain stage we're writing real code and things. So there is definitely this kind of real exploration to bring this to life, and that's basically what will make this possible actually.
Well, and also I just want to give Joe Frasico the shout out because he's on this webinar, but he's the head of research in North America for Philips. He's also worked at MGH. He's really a great champion for doing this. Like, that's the great point. It's let's just build it, guys, right? It's like, let's stop talking and start building. And that's kind of the spirit of this space we have at Philips, is that it's really just a collection of people that come together around this sort of tentpole idea and build out the best of the best. What can we do today that's cutting edge, but also is practical so that it can live tomorrow and be built in hospitals. So we really have a great situation, whereas in design, again, it's this projects like this don't come around all the time. And I just really honored to be able to work on it, because it just has such a high potential for impact and in such an area of great need, helping of course children have better medical outcomes.
Joseph, would you like to comment on this from a management perspective? And then we have a live question from Part.
Just briefly, this is an example of how we innovate, and our design team took the lead here and did as they described, worked with multiple stakeholders to refine this concept and turn it into something that was practical. And David outlined the positioning of the screen at the foot of the bed. There was also a situation where a nurse walked into the room and said, this is wonderful, but I can't use it because it's backwards. And it was literally set up for a left-handed nurse, remember? And yeah, these kinds of insights you wouldn't get unless you had a physical space to walk into to design. And so I think this is just a remarkable example of lots of high technology in a really complex space. We picked the NICU primarily because it's the most complex of the healthcare environments with the most stakeholders. And we figured if we could get this done and have our design team hit this one out of the park, then we could do it for anything. And I think they did. This is just an amazing space and great work. And couldn't have done it at all without our design team and lead. So thank you.
Yeah, that meeting is now infamously known as the "It's Backwards" meeting. It's like, oh, okay, of course, everything's backwards. Like I was
still,
back
it goes to show that that really, being there and making things a vision tangible also convinces business-wise, because in the end it has to convince people, right, Joseph? So it's not about the Excel sheet only.
That's correct, and we talked about this a long time before. So Alex said, 2011. That was another space in another country that this was built out in, and it was talked about continuously for many years until we said, we got to just stop talking about it. We have to build it. And so that's when they started the journey.
Wonderful. We have a question from Part Batavia. Part, can you briefly introduce yourself and
yeah,
hi,
I am Part Batavia and I'm a product designer from India. First of all, Alex, very nice concept, like connecting the family together is a big need which has been solved. So my question to you is, there are like it is a very nice concept, but there are a lot of problems which are very specific in the developing country, like the NICUs, the intensive care.
Part, the connection is really bad. We can barely understand the question. Could you type it in to the chat? Because it's really we can barely hear you. Maybe it would be
breaking up. So yeah, maybe type it in. Breaking up. I could.
Something about the family interface.
I think it was.
There was also a question about the Please, Alex. Sorry,
No, I think I didn't hear all the questions, but I think some of the questions are around the kind of developing countries and how we are dealing with this, right? And maybe that was the question.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yep.
Hello.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, I'll finish up my question. Actually, my question to you was that there are a lot of problems in the developing countries where NICUs, the intensive care unit, is the experience to be provided there requires an extra effort. Like there's lack of infrastructure, and you cannot provide that much of experience in terms of the lighting and all, which is shown in the design. So my question is, how do we like to provide such an experience in the developing countries, and like what all issues which we should cater to in the developing nations to cater the neonatals in such
right
countries.
So I think you got it. It was a question how to implement such an advanced service full of technology, high tech into also a developing country. Is there an idea on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's definitely, there are definitely very different challenges in a developing country, for sure. I think one of the parts that Dave talked about is the scalability. There's certain elements that, of course, we can look at how do you scale this. But I think the challenges that are very different, that we do have another group in our Philips that's actually looking at more at the issues in this area of the developing countries. I think some of the things that I would already kind of look at in terms of, let's say, one of the first things I would say is how do you provide this level of care, right? And one element I would say is if there is, let's say, the kind of informatic systems that can be easily translated, I think that's definitely something that's a lot easier. So how can you bring that kind of, get the developing countries to kind of leapfrog and go into this kind of information systems that can also observe and give your babies a better overview, right? So simple things like we're working on in terms of camera-based monitoring, how do you then track the baby without these kind of, so bringing that kind of technology as a way of accessing monitoring of the babies. Of course, the incubators is something that Philips no longer are working into, so that's something that we're looking to with third parties. But yeah, there is definitely one of the challenges. Again, the framework in terms of the education of how do you look after the neonates, in this, so the developmental care specifically, I think those kind of education systems can be brought in, right? So you also receive the level of care. But in terms of course, in the room with the advanced lighting and control system, maybe it's not something that, a developing country wants to afford to kind of invest in, right? But there are definitely other elements. And I would specifically say more important element would be the informatics, right, to really track and catch issues with the baby before things happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, that brings us to the question of transferability and democratization of healthcare. And I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but there is many spin-offs that are possible from this process and many learnings. And you also mentioned that neonatal care is really a niche in healthcare, but of course, adult care is much, much bigger also in terms of business. So there is more investment in there. There is more possibilities. And you said there is a lot of knowledge that could be transferred also to other fields. Can you make a few examples where that really hit you?
Yeah, I think Dr. Fresica mentioned, right, we tackle neonatal care because it's the most complex environment, right? So a lot of the learnings here is really, what we're looking at is to apply in the other areas. So of how do you create this, I think one of the big things is this collaborative portal of bringing all this fragmented information. So you can have the right information in the right place to make the right decision so you can deliver the right care, right? So this is really one of the, I think, innovations that we are looking to bring out to the other aspects as well, right? And of healthcare in general, whether it's adult care and whether, it doesn't have to be in critical care as well, in the general ward as well, right? So sometimes a lot of these kind of informations are missing. So I think that's definitely one element that I'll kind of focus on. I think in terms of democratizing as well, I think, the process itself, I think, there's a lot of learning of this team of how do we actually go in something and create something new, and whether it's this high-tech room or something that's more kind of, low level, that process, I think, is something that we will definitely, we are using actually to really build these up, these prototyping, and to learn from it. So I think that's definitely a couple of these other things. I don't know, Dave, do you have any kind of thoughts on there as well that you want to add to?
Yeah, I mean, I just think from working on a few projects that are similar throughout my career, really just building it and visualizing it, people will coalesce around it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to take that first step and be proactive and show something to really build that interest and get it to the level where it moves beyond a discussion. And, I think Alex and the team in Eindhoven built this really fantastic concept car. It wasn't perfect, but it had exciting ideas in it. And one of those took hold and led to this whole effort. So I guess I would just encourage anyone on the line who's a designer, you have big ideas or big thoughts about things, try to visualize them and try to make them as tangible as possible. They don't have to be perfect, but I think as soon as you have something that people can see and in some cases hold and interact with, it can just change the conversation dramatically and really lead towards outcomes like this, where you have the space to stop and think and have more of a blue sky approach to really challenging problems.
That's a great ending, I would say. This is about, I would say it's a cry out towards a hands-on approach. As you said, Alex, it's about prototyping, then testing, then showing, right? And this is where you start convincing people. Is it that simple? Of course, I put it very simply.
Yes, it is. I don't know.
No, it's
There's
not.
a lot of yada yada in there, but yeah, I think, just have energy and spirit and believe in yourself and, put it out there and defend it. And, I think it's just, things can happen. You can create something from nothing, but you have to start with the kind of the inspirational idea to get there. So.
And I think, and again, one last shout out. And I think, again, this would not have happened if we do not have the belief and trust of Dr. Fresica, which is on the call, right? He was also one of the champions in our organization at the executive level that really believe in this and help us push this through, right? So with any of these kind of work, you also need the belief of the management to really push it through and allow us to give that freedom and space and trust to kind of build this. And I think this is also, really wonderful. And thank you.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to talk about this project.
Thanks so much for your time, for your energy, and for this great work, and for pushing this through throughout the organization and on different levels. We are looking forward to see the development of it, maybe at some future awards, who knows. And of course, I invite everybody also to have a look at the website, have a look at more information about the project and all the other great projects that were in the race this year and the last years. And of course, to stay in the loop, stay connected with us for upcoming events and the next deep dives and the next events that we also do with upcoming designers. So there's also a lot of young blood coming up. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, David, Joseph, and everybody who joined here live, and everybody on LinkedIn. And I just wish you the best for the continuation and a lot of energy. And thanks for being with us here today. Bye-bye.